Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Due to some unavoidable circumstances, we rescheduled this session in the afternoon. Uh, so, before that, in the last session, we covered heat engine, refrigerator, and heat pump. We talked about the differences between refrigerator and heat pump as well, and we derived relations for their performance also. So let's recap those things quickly. Begin with the heat engine. So the heat engine is basically a device that converts input heat into a useful work, or it simply converts heat into a work. It is going to accept heat from one of the reservoir whose temperature is quite more compared to another reservoir to which the heat engine is going to reject some heat. So it will accept heat from high temperature reservoir, that is called as source. It will reject some heat to a low temperature reservoir, that is called as sink, and it will convert some amount of heat absorbed from the high temperature source into a useful work. So if you look at the directions of those interactions, the heat QH, or in some cases we call it as a Q1 also. So QH input to the system, this QL, or sometimes being called as Q2, is going out of the system, and this work is also going out of the system. So if I try to establish a relationship between those three, the relationship will be like QH, that is energy input to the system, is equal to W, that is one of the energy going out of the system, plus QL, that is another energy going out of the system. Or if you add this W plus QL, work output plus heat rejected by the engine, the addition of those two must be equivalent to heat input to the system. So from this one, you will get this relation. W net is equal to QH minus QL. So next relation is thermal efficiency. The performance measure in case of heat engine is called as thermal efficiency, and the relation is work produced or work output by heat supplied. So work output, we have derived this relation. W net is equal to QH minus QL. So if I replace the numerator with this one, I will get this another relation for the same N thermal, that is thermal efficiency. Or in some cases, this QL will be replaced by TL and QH will be replaced by TH. The reason is we know that the amount of heat absorbed by the engine from the high temperature reservoir will be proportional to the temperature of reservoir. Similarly, this QL, that is amount of heat rejected to a low temperature sink, will be proportional to temperature of the sink. So the relation could be N thermal is equal to 1 minus T2 by T1 also. T2 proportional to QL, and T1, that is QH is higher, is proportional to that. So temperature of that source, that is T1. So relation will be N thermal is equal to 1 minus T2 by T1. Similarly, we talked about the, let me go to the next slide. it has went unresponsive. So yeah, Pratik, can you tell me whether this slide is visible?
Yes, sir.
Slide is visible. Okay. But whether it is in full screen mode or regular mode?
No, sir. Now it
Now,
is in
now it
full
is in
screen.
full screen mode. Okay. What's wrong with this one? Okay. So next thing we talked about is one of the statement of second law of thermodynamics, that is Kelvin Planck statement. It deals with the heat engine. Now we know that whenever there is a heat engine, it is supposed to interact with one thermal reservoir that is going to be at higher temperature compared to another thermal reservoir that is going to be at low temperature. To work naturally, the heat engine is supposed to accept heat from low temperature reservoir and reject heat to a low temperature reservoir. And the difference of those two, or the heat engine will convert some part of heat that is absorbed from the high temperature source into a useful work. And if it is not doing so, that engine is not going to be practically possible, right? So Kelvin Planck states that it is impossible for a device that operates in a cycle to receive heat from single reservoir and produce net amount of work output. So if there is a device that is interacting with single thermal reservoir and producing all the heat taken from that source into useful work, then that is impossible, because in this case the efficiency of this engine is going to be 100%, and we know that that is not going to be possible. And if some device does that, then that is going to violate the Kelvin Planck statement, and that is not going to be possible at all. So this is first statement of the second law, that is called as Kelvin Planck statement. This statement is based on heat engine. Now we are going to talk about the second statement also, that is going to be based on either heat pump or refrigerator. So that we'll be talking in upcoming slides. So before that, the next part that we saw is the refrigerator and heat pump. Let me differentiate between refrigerator and heat pump on this slide. So this is our refrigerator and this is the heat pump. Now both devices are going to absorb heat from a low temperature reservoir and transfer that heat to a high temperature reservoir. If you compare temperature of this reservoir, where either refrigerator or heat pump rejecting the heat, the temperature of this reservoir will be always greater than the reservoir from where heat is being absorbed. So refrigerator or heat pump both are going to transfer heat from a low temperature reservoir to high temperature reservoir. But to do that, we need to provide some external work in case of heat pump as well as refrigerator, because we know that without this, without involvement of external work, heat can only transfer from T higher to T lower. And if you want to convert that heat in reverse direction, if you want to convert that heat into reverse direction, that is again Pratik, full screen mode has got exited, right?
Yes, sir.
Why this is happening today? Okay. So to transfer heat from low temperature to high temperature, we need to take help of some external work, right? Now, the difference between this refrigerator and heat pump is this desired effect or desired output. Both devices are going to work on the same cycle. Both are going to transfer heat from low temperature to high temperature with the help of consumption of some external work. The difference is that in case of refrigerator, the desired effect is a body at lower temperature, whereas in case of heat pump, desired effect is a body at higher temperature. Means in case of refrigerator, our focus will be on a body whose temperature is to be maintained at lower state than the atmospheric temperature. Whereas in case of heat pump, the focus will be on a body whose temperature is need to be maintained at higher temperature than the atmospheric temperature. And in case of this refrigerator and heat pump, the performance index will be called as coefficient of performance. In case of heat engine, that was efficiency, but in case of refrigerator or heat pump, that performance index will be called as coefficient of performance. Now, in case of refrigerator, the desired effect is the amount of heat extracted from the low temperature body or the temperature maintained of that low temperature body. So COP of refrigerator is equal to Q2, that is desired effect by work supplied. Whereas in case of heat pump, COP of heat pump is equal to, now in case of heat pump, desired effect is the Q1, because now this is our uh, body whose temperature is to be maintained. So in case of heat pump, this will become Q1 by W. And we know that W is equal to Q2 minus Q1 or Q1 minus Q2. Pratik, what is W?
Q1 minus Q2.
Yes, or simply the interaction with the high temperature body minus interaction with the low temperature body to avoid the confusion. Okay, we know that this is higher temperature compared to this one, so Q1 minus Q2. So this is going to be Q1 minus Q2. This is also going to be Q1 minus Q2. And when you simplify those two things further, you will get relation like this one. This is for a heat pump, and for refrigerator you will get this one, 1 minus QH by QL minus 1. And we derived one additional relation based on COP of heat pump and refrigerator, that COP of heat pump is equal to COP of refrigerator plus 1. Or in short, the COP of heat pump will be always greater by 1 than COP of refrigerator if that heat pump and refrigerator are working between same source and sink. When those two devices are working with the same source and same sink, then the relation is going to be like COP of heat pump is always greater by unity than COP of refrigerator. This one we have proved mathematically. So the next thing, there was one question that was asked to you. The question was like, if I keep the refrigerator door open, suppose this refrigerator has been in a room, and if I keep the door of refrigerator open, then can I reduce the temperature of this room? We know that the function of refrigerator is to cool this space, right? If I close this door, this will be closed place for that or closed space of the refrigerator, and the function of refrigerator is to reduce temperature of this one. Now if I open the door, the whole place or the whole room will be now space of this refrigerator, right? So in that case, if I open the refrigerator door, will the temperature of that room drop or increase? The room will become cold, or instead of becoming cold, it will start heating the room. What will be the exact scenario if I keep the refrigerator door open? That was the question, right? So does any one of you have got the answer for this one? If you have searched for that one, then you must have got something, right? So if any one of you know something or have got some clue,
Pressure will increase.
pressure will increase. Pratik,
Temperature.
room temperature will increase.
Ah,
Okay.
ah. Yes, sir.
Anybody? Okay, Pratik. So anybody else want to say something else, or should I go with Pratik? He says that if I open that uh, refrigerator door, then the room in which that refrigerator has kept, the temperature of that room will start increasing. Do you think Pratik, whatever Pratik says is correct, or any one of you want to object this one? No objection? Okay, so let's go with Pratik. Pratik, do you have a reason for this one? Why you say that the temperature of room is going to increase? Pratik, I think he got disconnected. Umesh, can you tell
Yes,
me?
sir.
Yes, Pratik.
Sir, because the refrigerator will exhaust more heat into the room.
Very, very good, very good. So, to explain that one, suppose this is our refrigerator, okay? This is the actual body from where it is going to absorb heat Q2. Suppose its temperature is T2, and it is going to reject that heat to atmosphere whose temperature is T1, and suppose that heat is Q1, and as it is transferring heat from low temperature body to high temperature body, we need to provide some external work also, right? So now if you compare this Q1 with Q2, this Q1 will be always greater than Q2. Why? Because we know that this QL will be proportional to this TL, and this Q1 will be proportional to T1. So Q1 will be always greater than Q2. The reason for that, refrigerator is going to absorb some heat from here. Additionally, we are providing some external work and the refrigerator will convert some part of that work again into heat. So we have taken some heat from here, we have provided work input, but refrigerator will convert some part of that work again into heat. So heat absorbed from here, the heat work converted into heat, and addition of those two heats will be rejected to the atmosphere. And because of that one, as the heat rejected to atmosphere is going to be always more compared to amount of heat absorbed from here. If you keep the door open, instead of cooling that room, its temperature will start increasing. Okay, so anybody has got any doubt in this one, you can ask, or we'll move to the next part. If anybody has any doubt, you can unmute
The
and
repeat
ask.
concept.
You want me to repeat this one, Pratik?
Yes, sir. The network issue.
Okay. Let me erase all the ink on this slide. Where is that shortcut? काहीतरी गडबड होती रे, काहीतरी भलतंच चालतंय MS ऑफिस पण. कुठे गेला तो शॉर्टकट आता? Okay, I'll explain here in the refrigerator. Okay. So in case of refrigerator, it is going to absorb heat from a body whose temperature is to be maintained at lower level. So it will take heat from here, and for its working itself, it is going to consume some work, because we need to drive this compressor. To drive this compressor, there would be one electric motor, and to run that electric motor, we need to provide some energy. Okay, so that energy is nothing but the work input to the system. So when you provide some work input to the system, the refrigerator will convert some part of that work again into heat. So it has absorbed some heat from here, it has converted some part of work into heat, and it adds those two heats, this one plus this one, and addition of those two heats will be rejected to the atmosphere. So if you compare the heat absorbed from here and heat rejected to atmosphere, the heat rejected to atmosphere is always greater than amount of heat absorbed from the body. And because of that one, if I keep the door open of the refrigerator, then the refrigerator that has been kept in which room, the temperature of that room will start increasing, because it is rejecting more heat compared to heat absorbed from the system. And because of that one, the whole room will start heating instead of being cooled. Is that fine, Pratik? Pratik, you there? I think he is facing some network issue. Okay, no problem. So the next part that we are going to begin with, second statement of the second law of thermodynamics. The second statement is related to, as I said earlier, the first statement, that is Kelvin-Planck statement, that is related to a heat engine, and the function of heat engine is to convert heat into work. Whereas the second statement, that is Clausius statement, that deals with either heat pump or refrigerator, and we know that the function of refrigerator is transfer of heat from low temperature body to transfer that heat to a high temperature body. So Clausius statement deals with heat pump or refrigerator, where the exchange of heat is there. There isn't any conversion of heat into work. So the statement is, it is impossible to construct a device that operates in a cycle produces no effect other than transfer of heat from low temperature body to high temperature body. Now to simplify this statement, let's take a look of this uh, sketch of the refrigerator. Now we know that if this refrigerator want to transfer heat from low temperature body to high temperature body, we need to provide some external work. But statement says that if we eliminate this work, in that case, the device will become, the device will work like it will transfer heat from low temperature body to high temperature body without consumption of any external work, and we know that that is not possible, right? Whenever you are transferring heat from low temperature body to high temperature body, we need to take help of some external work, and that is nothing but the statement of Clausius statement. It is impossible to construct a device that operates in a cycle that produces no other effect than. So it is impossible to construct device. What kind of device? The device that produces no effect other than transfer of heat from low temperature body to high temperature body, and such a device is not possible. So what addition has to be there? It need to take help of some external work. So this work has to be there, and if this work is not there, this device will not work, and that is nothing but the Clausius statement. So to simplify that statement further, so Clausius statement, it states that refrigerator cannot operate unless a compressor is driven by external power source such as electric motor. So if compressor is not there, refrigerator will not work. Or if you, even if you have refrigerator in your house, the life of that refrigerator will be decided by this compressor. The quality of this compressor will decide the life. As long as that compressor is running, your refrigerator is running. Once that compressor is dead, your refrigerator is also dead. Okay. So that is the Clausius statement. That is another statement of the second law of thermodynamics. Now, there is equivalence between those two statements. Now we are going to prove equivalence between two statements of the second law. The first one is Kelvin-Planck statement and second one is Clausius statement. So we are going to prove that equivalence. So equivalence means if you violate one of the statement, that leads to violation of the other statement. Means if you create or if you make one device that is violating Clausius statement, then ultimate result of that violation of Clausius statement will be violation of Kelvin-Planck statement. And reverse to that, if you design a device that is violating Kelvin-Planck statement, then ultimate result is going to be violation of Clausius statement. So in short, violation of one statement leads to violation of second statement. And this dependence is called as equivalence of those two statements. Now to prove that equivalence, we need to write a small derivation. But before that, let's discuss those two sketches. In the first sketch, you can see there is a heat engine that is accepting heat from a high temperature reservoir which is at T higher, The amount of heat extracted is QH. Okay, let's continue. So here, what we were discussing, this is heat engine that is exchanging heat with a high temperature reservoir, that is source. The amount of heat extracted is QH, and it is converting all that heat into W net. As we can see, it is not rejecting any heat to a low temperature sink. Okay, so we know that if device that is transferring heat or converting all the heat into useful work, its efficiency is going to be 100%, and it is going to violate which statement, Pratik? Either Kelvin Planck or Clausius?
Kelvin Planck.
Kelvin Planck statement, very good. So we know that if such a device is there, then it is going to violate the Kelvin Planck statement. Now we just said that equivalence means if we consider one device that is violating one of the statement of the second law, the ultimate result is going to be violation of second statement, that is Clausius statement. So let's see, can it now violate the Clausius statement also? So we considered violation of Kelvin Planck over here. Now there is a refrigerator that is exchanging heat, or that is transferring heat from low temperature reservoir to high temperature reservoir, and for its work we are providing work output of that heat engine. So its output is directly provided to the refrigerator. Now, if we consider those two devices together, because it is not rejecting any heat to the low temperature reservoir, so now we have considered those two devices as a single unit, then combinedly they will act as a heat pump that is transferring heat from low temperature reservoir to high temperature reservoir, and it is not taking any external work. W is equal to 0, because now we have combined those two devices. So those two are interactions with the same reservoir, and this is interaction with the low temperature reservoir. So in short, combinedly or togetherly, they are transferring heat from low temperature body to high temperature body without help of any external agency. They are not consuming any external work and transferring heat from low temperatures to high temperature, and that is going to be violation of Clausius statement. So we considered violation of Kelvin Planck, and the result that we got is violation of Clausius statement. Same thing is here, or the resulted diagram we have drawn over here. So togetherly, they will act like a device that is transferring heat from low temperature body to high temperature body, and there isn't any external assistance, and that is violation of Clausius statement. Now, if you still have any doubt in this equivalence, to simplify this one, I have written, or I have proved that dependence separately by considering violation of either of the device, either of the statement. So let's take a look of the half part first. We are going to talk about this half part first. Now here, if you look at this sketch, there is a heat pump that is transferring heat from cold reservoir at temperature T2 to hot reservoir at temperature T1. And for that one, it is supposed to consume some external work, but what we have considered, the amount of work supplied is 0. So we know that this is violation of Clausius statement, because it is transferring heat from low temperature body to high temperature body without consumption of external work, and that is violation of Clausius statement. Now, between same hot reservoir and cold reservoir, we have considered another device, that is a heat engine. Now that heat engine is accepting heat Q1 from hot reservoir T1 and rejecting some heat to reservoir, cold reservoir T2. The amount of heat rejected is Q2, and it is also producing some work output, the difference between Q in and Q out, or Q1 and Q2. The difference between those two is nothing but the work produced by the heat engine. Now we know that this Q1 and this Q1 both are interaction with the same reservoir at constant temperature. So this Q1 will be proportional to T1, this Q1 will be proportional to T1. So this Q1 and this Q1 is going to be same. That's why I have written Q1 only. So the amount of heat rejected by the heat pump will be exactly same that of amount of heat accepted by the heat engine for its working. Now, if the heat rejected by heat pump and heat accepted by the heat engine is same, let's remove this reservoir. So what we do? We remove this reservoir, and here I have shown that connection with dotted line. So here what we have done, we have eliminated this reservoir. So now this reservoir is not there, and we have connected output of heat pump directly to the input of heat engine, because the heat rejected by heat pump is exactly same as that of heat accepted by heat engine. So instead of involving that reservoir, we have connected output of heat pump to the heat engine. Now, if I connect those two togetherly, they will act like a heat engine. And what this heat engine is doing, it is exchanging heat with single reservoir and producing net work output. But we know that if that is a heat engine, it need to exchange heat with high temperature reservoir as well as low temperature reservoir, and then it can produce some work, right? But here what is happening? Combinedly, it is exchanging heat with the single reservoir and producing net work output, and that is violation of Kelvin-Planck statement. So initially what we considered one device that is violating Clausius statement, and ultimate result we have got violation of Kelvin-Planck statement. Anybody has got any doubt in this one? You can unmute and ask, or else I'll move to the another part of the same proof. Pratik, any doubt, any query?
No, sir.
Umesh, any doubt?
No, sir.
Okay. So in the second part, now what we are going to do, in the first part we considered violation of Clausius statement, and ultimate result we got Kelvin-Planck statement. Now we are going to make a reverse of that one. So we will consider violation of Kelvin-Planck, and we will get the violation of Clausius statement. So let's see if we can do that. So there is one heat engine that is taking heat from high temperature reservoir, that is at T1. The amount of heat taken is Q1. It is producing work W, and it is not transferring any heat to a low temperature reservoir, because we have written Q2 is equal to 0. So this is violation of Kelvin-Planck statement, a device exchanging heat with single reservoir and converting all that heat into useful work. So that is violation of Kelvin-Planck. Now let's consider another device, a heat pump, that is transferring heat from a low temperature reservoir T2 to high temperature reservoir, that is at T1. And we know that for heat pump we need to provide some external work. So let's provide the work output of this heat engine to the heat pump. Okay, So now if I combine those two devices together, what they are doing, they are transferring heat from low temperature body at temperature T2 to a high temperature body T1, or those two are combinedly exchanging heat with two reservoir, that is from low temperature to high temperature, and they are not taking any external work. When they two are considered together, initially what we did, we provided its output to the heat pump, that is fine. But when you combine those two are exchanging heat with low temperature reservoir as well as high temperature reservoir. They are transferring it from low temperature to high temperature, but they are not taking assistance of any external agency. They are not taking any external work, and that is violation of Clausius statement. So that way you can consider violation of Clausius statement and prove violation of Kelvin-Planck, or you can consider violation of Kelvin-Planck and ultimate proof will be violation of Clausius statement. So in short, if you consider violation of one statement, the ultimate result is going to be violation of other statement. If you consider Clausius, violation of Kelvin-Planck will be there. And if you consider violation of Kelvin-Planck, violation of Clausius will be there. Okay, is that fine? Any doubt, any query? Sumit, any doubt, any query? Sumit Pawar. If you have any doubt, any query, you can ask Umesh. Any doubt?
No, sir.
Who else is there? Samadhan.
Yes, sir.
काय डाऊट, काय क्वेरी?
No, sir.
एक्झाम मध्ये प्रूव्ह करता येईल?
हो, sir.
The question will be like, prove the equivalence between Kelvin-Planck and Clausius statement. State and prove the equivalence between Kelvin-Planck and Clausius statement. So you need to draw these sketches and write this proof also. Okay, it is there in the notes, so that wouldn't be any issue. But there shouldn't be any doubt how we have proved this one. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So there wouldn't be any question like compare the Kelvin-Planck and Clausius statement. But to have better understanding, I have written comparison between those two. So the comparison is the Kelvin-Planck is related to heat engine and Clausius is related to either heat pump or refrigerator. That is the major difference between those two. All other things are going to be there. Both are the negative statement and both are based on the experimental observations. There isn't any mathematical proof to either Kelvin-Planck or Clausius statement. Both are experimental observations. Okay, so that is the difference between those two. Major difference: Kelvin-Planck related to heat engine, Clausius statement related to heat pump or refrigeration. Or if you want to write something else, Kelvin-Planck deals with the conversion of Q into W, that is conversion of heat into work, whereas Clausius statement deals with the heat transfer Q to Q from low temperature to high temperature, but there is going to be transfer of heat and there is going to be conversion of heat into work. Next is PMM2. Now, PMM2 stands for perpetual motion machine. 2 stands for second kind. Before that, while studying the first law of thermodynamics, we talked about the PMM1. So PMM1 stands for perpetual motion machine of first kind. So just like PMM1, there is PMM2 also. So before defining that PMM2, can any one of you tell me what is PMM1 or how can we get PMM1? Samadhan?
Yes, sir.
What is PMM1?
No, sir.
नो सर. अभ्यास कर रे. नेक्स्ट. कोणी सांगू शकतंय काय होतं PMM1?
Sir, if we do not provide any external output to a machine and it produces work, it is not possible.
Okay, good. So in short, if you want to remember this PMM1 and PMM2, the PMM1 is related to first law of thermodynamics, PMM2 is related to second law of thermodynamics. So first law was you cannot create energy, you cannot destroy energy, you can just convert it from one form to the another. So if I produce a device that continuously produces work output without consumption of any heat energy or without consumption of any energy, a device that produces work output but it is not consuming any energy, then that is violation of first law, and that device is called as PMM1. समाधान.
Yes, sir.
आता लक्षात राहील.
Oh, sir.
Okay. Similarly, PMM2 stands for a perpetual motion machine of second kind and a device that violates second law of thermodynamics is called as PMM2. So this is for Kelvin-Planck statement. If there is a device that is exchanging heat with single reservoir and converting all that heat into useful work, then it is said to have 100% efficiency, and such a device is impossible. That is Kelvin-Planck statement. And if such a device is there, which is exchanging heat with single reservoir and converting that heat into useful work, then that device is called as PMM2 or perpetual motion machine of second kind. Okay, so that is PMM2, and the one that violates first law of thermodynamics, that converts or that produces work without consumption of any energy, that device is called as PMM1. Okay. Next thing that we are going to talk about is reversible and irreversible processes. We have discussed this one in the past, what is meant by reversible process and irreversible process, while discussing the quasi-static process. Quasi-static in the sense almost stationary process. Quasi means almost and static stands for stationary. So while discussing that quasi-static process, we have discussed this reversible and irreversible process. So we are going to discuss it again, but we are going to discuss it in with some other aspect. So the reversible process is basically a process that can be reversed without leaving any trace on the surrounding. Without leaving any trace on the surrounding means if process is occurring in one direction, along with the process, its surrounding will also change. And if that process returns to its initial state, then surrounding should also return to its original state. And if surrounding returns to its original state, then there will not be any proof or any like evidences of that process, and such a process is called as a reversible process. Whereas irreversible process is process that cannot be reversed. If you cannot reverse it, then that is irreversible process. Now, in a real life, all the processes are irreversible processes. In nature, there isn't any reversible process. All the processes are irreversible processes. If all the processes are irreversible, then why we are studying this reversible process, right? Because in nature we cannot have reversible process. Still we are studying reversible process. The reason is these processes are easy to analyze. Easy to analyze in the sense the reversible processes are ideal processes. Ideal processes in the sense, let's take example of you as a student. If I say, let's take example of Samadhan. Samadhan, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm going to take your example. Hope you don't mind. So let's consider Samadhan is an ideal student. Okay. Actually, whether he is ideal or not, we don't need to discuss that part. Samadhan himself knows that whether he is ideal or not. But let's consider Samadhan is a ideal student. Now, if Samadhan is a ideal student, uh, do I need to worry about his performance? Means, when he attends the online classes, do I need to check whether Samadhan is present or not? Do I need to check whether Samadhan is noting down all the things that are being discussed? Do I need to check whether he has attempted quizzes, whether he is studying on regular basis? No, I don't need to check whether all these things are being done properly. Why? Because Samadhan is an ideal student. So if Samadhan is ideal student, I need not to worry about his performance and all, and I can easily analyze his performance. Right? That is the one reason. The processes that are reversible are easy to analyze because we can predict their performance. I can easily predict that Samadhan will attend the classes, he will solve the assignments, he will attempt the quizzes. We can predict that if he is ideal, right? So that way, if process is ideal, we can predict its performance, we can easily analyze its performance. And the second reason of studying these reversible processes is, in nature, all the processes are irreversible processes. Irreversible processes, but those are not ideal processes. So we need to check the performance of those irreversible processes, and to check the performance of those irreversible processes, we need to have certain standard. Means if I want to check the performance of Samadhan, and if I take reference as a Srikar, will that be fine? No, right? If I want to check performance of Samadhan, I need to go for somebody who performs better than Samadhan, right? So for that one, we need to define, or we need to have ideal process first to compare the actual processes, and we can that way improve the existing processes. Means all the irreversible processes, if I want to analyze those processes, if you want to improve their performance, then you need to have some reference standard process, and those processes are nothing but reversible processes or ideal processes. So reason behind studying these processes is, first one, they are easy to analyze and they serve as idealized models to which actual processes can be compared. So those two are the reasons for studying the reversible processes. Now let's take few examples of reversible processes, or let's talk about the nature of those reversible processes. The first example is a frictionless pendulum. This is again a ideal process. We know that the what can we say, the natural position of this pendulum is going to be exactly straight. If I have pivoted one of the end of that pendulum over here, then this ball is going to lie exactly in a straight line, exactly below that pivoted point, right? And that position will be natural position of that pendulum. It will remain there if you don't disturb it. Now, if I disturb its position, if I pull it in any direction, let it be in this direction or this in this direction, and if I release it, what will happen? It will start oscillating. If I consider this as initial distance, then that distance will keep on decreasing, 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 and finally it will settle in this position where this rod is going to be vertical and ball is exactly below the point of this pivoted point, right? The reason this happens is the friction over here. That friction will continuously keep absorbing some energy caused by this motion, and that friction will continuously oppose this motion, and because of that one it will become stationary after certain time. If this friction is not there, it will keep oscillating for infinite time, right? That is the first example. Second, quasi-equilibrium expansion and compression of the gas. If this piston moves in left direction in quasi-equilibrium condition, quasi-equilibrium means almost equilibrium, slowly, if you move piston in this direction, the fluid will start compressing, the pressure will start increasing. Increasing means if piston moves till this position, it will have certain pressure value. When it moves till this position, it will have some different pressure value. For this position, it will have certain value. And if you move this piston from this position to this position, it will retain the pressure value it was having earlier. If you shift it to this position, again that pressure will be same when it was there initially, and when it returns back to its original position, the pressure will have same value. So that way we can say it is reversible, but again there shouldn't be any friction over here, or else that friction will be converted into heat or thermal energy, and there will be variation in the pressure, because if the system start heating, because of that heat the pressure is going to change, and that way that process will become irreversible. And if those two things are absent over there, then that process could be reversible. Now the next example is the process is expected to be extremely slow. If you want to have reversible process, that process has to be extremely slow. Means if process is extremely slow, that process could be reversible. I am not saying that if process is slow, it will be reversible. I am saying that if process is extremely slow, that process can be a reversible process. But if process is fast, then that is going to be irreversible for sure. Let me explain this one. Suppose you have this vessel. This is vertical wall, and if I start pouring water, suppose initially water level is somewhere here, it will have certain pressure applied on this vertical wall. If I add some water till this level, there would be increase in pressure. If I add further, there will be increase in pressure till this point. If I keep adding slowly, there will be increase in pressure. Now the steps or the stages in which I have added water to the system, now if I start taking out same water in same amount in same rate, then what will happen? The rate with which the pressure on this vertical wall went on increasing with addition of water will now go on decreasing with removal of the water. Okay, that will happen when the addition of this water is extremely slow then only this variation will be same. Now, instead of that one, or instead of adding this water slowly and steadily, if I drop some amount of water suddenly, what will happen? There will be a generation of wave, either of this nature or this nature, right? So when you add some amount of water at faster rate, there will be generation of wave, and when at addition of certain water, if wave is like this one, there will be this much pressure acting on the wall, whereas for the same amount of water, if wave is like this one, then there will be more amount of pressure exerted on this vertical wall. So you cannot say that for same amount of water you will always find same amount of pressure on the vertical wall. When you are adding water at faster rate, or when you are removing water at faster rate, right? Instead of that one, if you add slowly and steadily, then that increase of pressure will be same for same amount of water. Whether you are adding water or removing water, pressure range will be same. But in case of fast addition or removal of that water, that pressure range is not going to remain same. So that way, if you want to have a reversible process, you need to make it extremely slow. And if process is fast, then that is definitely going to be irreversible process. Now there are certain characteristics of that irreversible process that we need to discuss. What are the reasons that makes process irreversible? So the first reason is friction. If there is a friction, the process is definitely going to be irreversible. Why? Because suppose this is piston cylinder arrangement. I am providing some work and I want to see the change in pressure. Then some amount of this work will be absorbed by the friction over here, and that is going to be converted into heat. That heat will be dissipated to the atmosphere. That heat you cannot take back. So when you want to make this piston move backward with dropping this pressure, and this backward movement you want to uh, have that same amount of work again, then that will not be possible, because some amount of work has got converted into heat, and that heat has got dissipated into atmosphere, and that you cannot take back. So you cannot have same amount of work again. So friction makes process irreversible. Second cause of irreversibility is unrestricted expansion. If there is piston cylinder arrangement, you can move piston in this direction, there will be compression. If you expand this gas, piston will move towards right. So that will be restricted expansion, because that expansion has got restricted by this piston. But instead of that one, suppose there is a layer of suppose uh, a rubber layer is there, or instead of this one, let's consider a balloon that has got filled with the air. If I pierce this balloon with a needle, it will burst and air or gas will escape into the atmosphere. Now, can I take that gas back and have that balloon again with the same amount of air in it? No, because once I pierce it with needle, the expansion of gas inside the balloon is of nature unrestricted one, because that expansion is not restricted, that is free expansion. So similarly, if there is some layer, and if I break that layer, the gases inside the chamber will rush out of the system, and it will be released out of the system. And as this layer has got broken, I cannot take those gases back into the system and retain that original pressure again. So unrestricted expansion is another cause of the irreversibility. Second cause is mixing of two fluids. If you mix water and milk, kerosene and petrol, you cannot separate those two things, right? So mixing of such a fluids always makes process irreversible. Heat transfer across a finite temperature difference. If there is a can that is at a temperature of 5 degrees Celsius, atmospheric temperature is 20 degrees Celsius. If you keep this can in open atmosphere, its temperature will increase and become 20 degrees Celsius. Now, for any duration, if I keep that can in open atmosphere, can I attain that 5 degrees Celsius again? No, right? So that is the cause of reversibility, heat transfer because of finite temperature difference. Finite temperature difference in the sense the body has got something different temperature and atmosphere has got different temperature, and because of temperature difference between those two, heat will transfer from high temperature to low temperature, and that reverse transfer of heat naturally is not possible. We can use that refrigerator again and we can attain that 5 degrees Celsius, but naturally that is not possible. You keep that can for any duration in the open atmosphere, it will not attain the 5 degrees Celsius. Next reason is electric resistance. Whenever there is current carrying conductor, if you pass current through it, it will get heated and some amount of current will get converted into heat. That heat will be released to the atmosphere. You cannot get back that heat using this conductor and convert that into electric current. You can convert heat into electricity. There are certain devices, but with same device, you cannot convert heat into current again. So that is another reason for the irreversibility. Next is inelastic deformation of solids. Inelastic means plastic deformation. If I consider this pen, if I bend it till this point, it will return back to its original position. So till this point, it is elastic deformation, right? Because it can return back to original position if I remove the applied force. But if I stretch it beyond this point, it will break. I'm not going to do that, but if I stretch it beyond this point, it will break. And once it has got deformed, breaking is nothing but plastic deformation. So once it has got deformed plastically, I cannot get it back to this position again, right? So plastic or inelastic deformation of solid is the cause of irreversibility. Similarly, another example is chemical reactions. If you mix two chemicals and if reactions occurs between those two chemicals, then that reaction cannot be reversed. Like if I take this cloth and burn it, that is the chemical reaction, oxidation, right? Reaction between this cloth and oxygen is nothing but the oxidation reaction. So once that reaction has been taken place, can I get back this handkerchief again? No. So chemical